I'd like to call the Finance Committee meeting to order for Monday, August 22nd, 2022. First item I have on tonight's agenda is Resolution 10222. That's a resolution to increase city budgets to reflect the higher price of fuel and the higher costs associated with running the fuel depot. If you'll give me some latitude here, Mr. Service Safety Director, I'll speak for you, but Service Safety Director Martin spoke last meeting indicating this would come as a consolidated piece because of the higher price of fuel. So, and then obviously the expenses of the fuel depot and buying fuel is much more than what they had budgeted. So this is a correcting piece for the remainder of the budget. Anything that does not get spent gets carried over into the year-end carryover. So anything you'd like to add?
That's correct. And you've seen, it's been a while, but we've had similar.
Yeah, this is not our first rodeo.
Right.
Yeah, this has happened a few years back. So two readings on this piece. Any questions for the Service Safety Director? Very good. Thanks. Thank you. Moving on. Next item I have is Resolution 10322. That's a resolution authorizing the mayor to submit an application to participate in the Ohio Public Works Commission State Capital Improvement Project and execute contracts as required. This is coming through water pollution. Mr. James.
Thank you, Chairman Stoughton. I would like to invite Ms. Denise Cruz to the podium. This has to do with some culvert replacements out on East Main Street, and I'll let her expand on that.
Good evening. So this is our annual application to the Ohio Public Works Commission, looking desperately for grant funds to help us pay for capital improvements. The East Main Street culverts will be our number 2 project. Mitch and Kurt are putting together some kind of roadway project for our number 1 project. And as Mr. James said, this is for the 2 culverts on East Main Street, the one at Sells Road and the one immediately east of Sells Road. They're both undersized, and we experienced some flooding out there, so we're going to upgrade those, and we need to do it before the state route paving project in 2025.
I have a couple questions.
Yes.
What's the number 1 project again?
Mitch and Kurt are putting together some kind of paving project.
Okay.
They haven't decided yet.
Okay. And then is there an estimate of the amount on this project?
I don't know that I've seen an estimate. This is Stephen's project.
Okay.
2 elementars working on the plans, and I know they're to submit something this month, the preliminary study and the cost estimate.
Okay. Very good. Thank you.
We're looking for a grant of approximately $500,000.
Yeah, typically they fall into that,
Yeah.
4 to 6 to 7 range. Further questions for Denise? What's your pleasure?
We'll ask for 3 readings on this, and Mr. Matlin will be my second on it.
Okay, 3 readings, and Mr. Matlin as the second on 10322. Thanks, Denise. Next item I have is 10422. That is a resolution to appropriate funds in the Water Reserve Fund 6027 and authorize the payment of bills for the ODWA loan for the North Water Treatment Plan and authorize any then and now certificates. Again, coming through water pollution. Mr. James.
Thank you, Chairman Stoughton. As Denise didn't even bother sitting down, she's got more information on this one as well.
So this is just a bookkeeping item. In order to sign a contract, and you've authorized the contract, we need Tricia to sign an auditor certificate, and she can't sign an auditor certificate unless the money's been appropriated. So what this does is it appropriates the money that we'll be receiving or OWDA will be paying on our behalf. So it's not necessarily our money, it's money coming from OWDA, and we just need to appropriate it so we can sign a contract.
It's kind of confusing, but it's loaned money, right?
Correct.
But they're paying it, as opposed to loaning to us for us to pay it. They're kind of paying it on our behalf?
So the payments to Kokosing will be made directly to Kokosing from OWDA. The payments for the engineer and the resident project representative will come to us and we pay them.
See, I
How
told
they're
you it was
set up.
confusing.
Yeah, and by state audit and ORC, any payments made on the city's behalf, even though whatever, whether it be ODOT, whether it be, I have to track them down and record them as we receive them and pay them. So I then have to track everything that even
Of
though
course
we
you
don't
do.
pay. And that's why I got a budget so I can certify it.
Okay. Further questions on that? What's your pleasure?
We might add that this is approximately $11 million that we're asking to have done with this.
Yes, that's for this year.
Right, just for expenditure this year. We would like to suspend tonight because of some timing issues, and Ms. Teener will be my second, I believe.
All right, we'll ask for suspension, and Mrs. Teener is the second on 10422.
Yes.
Thank you.
Very good, thank you, Denise.
Thanks, Denise.
Next item I have is Resolution 10522. That's a resolution to decrease appropriations in the general fund for contract services in the law director and city prosecutor's office in the amount of $10,350 coming through finance, but I'm going to defer to Law Director Hall for comments.
Thank you, sir. Just briefly, we have finally got a candidate for our assistant prosecutor position.
Yay.
And we couldn't be more thrilled about that, especially as the case numbers are going back up from the COVID lull. So this individual, unfortunately, he took the bar in July here in Ohio, and he has a Massachusetts legal intern's license, but the Ohio Supreme Court will not recognize that. So unfortunately, he has to wait until October, end of October, beginning November, to find out whether or not he passed the Ohio bar. Based on his academic credentials, his experience, and what he did previously, I don't have any concerns about him passing the bar. But this is an assistant prosecutor position, so you have to be an attorney to take that position. So we're just asking that City Council move some money out of our salary line item into our contract services so we can pay him as an intern, essentially, to handle the intakes and brief writing and appellate writing and everything that he can do right now to learn the law here in Ohio and kind of start learning how to be an assistant prosecutor in our office in anticipation of him passing the bar. And I will say, I had Teresa run the numbers for me earlier today, and we will still be giving back approximately $76,000 to the general fund at the end of the year from our salary line item, just because we couldn't find
Didn't have
anybody
it filled.
for so long. So,
Well, good news and good news,
Yes.
right? So, all right, questions for the law director?
I have a quick question.
Sure.
Yes,
Will
ma'am.
that be November that he finds out?
Yes, they find out it's either the last week in October or the first week in November, depending on the grading of those exams.
And if he passes, then he's hired after that, right?
Yes, if he passes, he will be hired as an assistant prosecutor.
Then it'll be paid out of a different bucket
Yes.
of money.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, that's all good news. All right, any other questions? All right, so you're asking for suspension for
Yes, please.
obvious reasons. So we will suspend on this. Mrs. Kreitz, will you second?
Yes, sir.
Very good. Thank you very much. All right. Moving on, next item is Resolution 10622. That's a resolution accepting the amounts and rates as determined by the Fairfield County Budget Commission and authorizing the necessary tax levies and certifying them to the county auditor. Auditor Nettles indicated that this was forthcoming. This is an annual required resolution from the city certifying the amounts to be collected from general property taxes for 2023 to be given to the county auditor. Anything you want to add to that?
Nope.
Nope. And we're going to go 3 readings on this. This is almost akin to that budget thing as well that Mr. Rule loves so much that we used to do. And
We don't have to do it anymore.
yeah, we don't have to do it anymore. So this is an annual piece. We'll go a full 3 readings. Any questions? Seeing none, Mr. McDaniel, will you second that, please?
Yes, I will.
Awesome. So we will go 3 readings on 10622. Next item I have on the agenda is Resolution 10722. That's a resolution to advance funds from the General Fund 101 to transfer into Lancaster Community Development in the amount of $50,000. This is coming through Economic Development. Mr. McDaniel.
Yes, well, as everyone knows, we received a notification last year that we received a grant award of $1 million for the Healthy Homes Production Program. This program has begun soliciting people who are interested in participating, and there's guidelines on who qualifies and what type of home repairs can be done, et cetera, et cetera. This grant has it's a reimbursement grant, so the money has to be spent before the federal government will return funds to the city for money that we expend. This legislation is asking that essentially the general fund, not essentially, actually, the general fund would provide the $50,000 advance and then allow for reimbursement to come back after the funds are expended. And I think Linda is here, maybe will address a few questions, but I know that we have an Economic Development Committee meeting on September 1st where we're going to hash out more detail. and be able to see more information regarding the grant and grant recipients and programs and projects already approved through the processes we have. But that's kind of a nutshell what we're looking at on the legislation. If anyone would have questions for Linda, I'll invite her up.
I suspect maybe going through committee might be the first thing. I know that, I brought some questions your way, I'm sure others have, about the $50,000 general fund appropriation. So, we can bring her up today or bring it through committee if you want to.
So she did provide us some information ahead of the meeting, but I do think committee would allow a lot of questions and answers to take place and provide more detail for the committee members to make a recommendation as to our stance on the legislation as presented. So I'm comfortable with discussing this at Economic Development Committee meeting at 7:30 a.m. on September 1st in the 1897 room at Municipal Hall. But we're also not going to ask for suspension. I know it shows on the agenda that we were going to ask for suspension. We're not going to ask for suspension on that legislation to allow it to be discussed at committee.
Any issues with that plan? Yes, Mrs.
I
Keener.
just have a question, if I could ask Linda. When does this need to be in by? Is there a time? There is no time.
We just can't start the program until we have cash to spend on it.
Okay.
Other questions? Any issues with Mr. McDaniel's plan? I endorse that plan. I think it's a good one. Very good.
Thank you.
So we'll 2 readings at the very least, right?
Yes, 2 to 3 readings, and Mr. Schoonover is the second on that.
Excellent. Very good. Thank you, sir. We appreciate that. So we will go at least 2 readings on 10722 pending the economic development meeting on September 1st. Thank you, Don. Next item I have is Resolution 10822. That's a resolution to accept the written recommendations of the Tax Incentive Review Council for the continuance of the 2006 TIF agreement for the Edie Road development at all, if you will. So being on that committee, being forced on that committee, be a forced appointment on that committee, being forced to be on that committee. You're welcome. Yes, thank you, Mr. President. We actually held that meeting with the Auditor Brown and a lot of folks in the city, and the city schools treasurer was there. With the information that we had, and Anitra from the auditor's office was a big help in getting this information. We went through the TIF from 2006, and it was the recommendation of the Turk, if you will, to continue that TIF agreement as written. So that is you got the notes in your legislation. We're going to go a full 3 readings on this particular approval process. So if you have any questions in between now and then, feel free to ask me or the auditor. She's probably smarter on it than I am. But we're going to go 3 readings on accepting the recommendation of the Turk. Mr. McDaniel, will you second that?
Yes.
Are there any questions on that? We haven't had this Turk around for a while, but it's been a few years dormant, but there was a long, long time ago we actually had this. So nevertheless, everything seems to be in order there. All right, do we have any departmental updates this evening? I see no departmental updates, so I'll defer to President Uhl for tonight's meeting prep.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have done most of the prep. I'll just mention very quickly that I think we've all received notice that a petition has been submitted, and I've had conversations with Jan, and I know others have as well. I know Paul had talked with Jan, and so what we're going to request between voter and taxpayer time and the next item on the agenda is that we suspend the rules, really for 2 reasons. One, so that we can address that agenda at that time and not wait until new business to do it. And secondly, the mayor has a statement that he would like to read relative to some erroneous comments that were made during voter and taxpayer time by a resident at our last meeting. And so all of that will happen as we slide new business up under after voter and taxpayer time. So that's the request that I'm making, and we'll move forward with that if that motion comes to the floor. Otherwise, I'll turn it back to the chairman.
Any other items for finance? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'd like to make that motion, Mr. Chairman.
We have a
I
motion
will second that motion.
and a second, and we are adjourned. It is, 6:15. Look at that.
Whoa, that's a good job there, Mr. Stowe. The regular meeting of Lancaster City Council will begin precisely at 6:30.
You walked down the aisle and promised happily ever after. Sometimes happily ever after means ending a relationship. We know the conversations are not easy. Deciding what's best for you, your children, and your next steps takes work and communication. At Dagger Law, we know there are no monsters in a divorce, only people trying to find their way. Local, trusted, experienced. Dagger Law.
The Frankie Smith Funeral Home and Crematory in Lancaster and the Johnson Smith Funeral Home in Baltimore have a long and wonderful history of serving our community. Feel free to give us a call at 740-653-0652. Stop in and see us at either of our two locations, 405 North Columbus Street in Lancaster and 207 South Main Street in Baltimore. Respect for tradition, regard for change.
Good evening. Welcome to Lancaster City Council. Please join me in a word of prayer. Father, we are once again here thankful that you have called us to do this work. We ask that you would continue to lead, guide, and direct us as we go forward tonight. Lord, we pray for Lancaster City School students, teachers, staff, and administrators. As today was the first day of school, a whole school year is before us, and you bless them and keep them as well. Keep them safe and help them have great times of learning and of relationship building. And Father, can you please work in their lives in such a way that they would become productive citizens of our community as they work their way through the education system? We ask that you would be with us tonight in all that we do. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. I hereby call this meeting of Lancaster City Council to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ehlers?
Here.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Here.
Mr. James?
Here.
Mr. Matlin? Mr. McDaniel?
Here.
Mr. Schoonover?
Here.
Ms. Sitterly?
Here.
Mr. Stoughton?
Here.
And Mrs. Teener?
Here.
Let the record reflect that 8 of 9 members of City Council are in attendance this evening. Mr. Stoughton.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to make a motion that we excuse Mr. Matlin from tonight's meeting.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to excuse Mr. Matlin from this evening's meeting. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Excuse me.
Reading and disposing of the journal.
Sorry, tickling in my throat. I'd like to present the regular meeting minutes dated August the 8th, 2022.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to receive and file the journal.
Oh, we're going to need seconds tonight since Mr. Matlin's not here. Mr. McDaniel, you take care of that for us?
I'll second that.
Thank you very much. We have a motion and a second to receive and file the journal. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion,
I have to abstain. I wasn't here.
okay, with one abstention. Thank you very much. Motion carries. Reports of city officials.
Email dated August 10th, 2022 regarding economic development meeting date change submitted by Mr. McDaniel. Email dated August 10th, 2022 regarding public works meeting agenda submitted by Mr. Schoonover. Email dated August 10th, 2022 regarding public works meeting agenda submitted by Mr. James. Email dated August 17th, 2022 regarding the August 22nd, 2022 meeting submitted by Mr. Matlin. Email dated August 17th, 2022 regarding the August 22nd, 2022 meeting submitted by President Ohl. Email dated August 17th, 2022 regarding cancellation of the August IT meeting submitted by Mrs. Teener. Email dated August 19th, 2022 regarding Lancaster Turk meeting submitted by Law Director Stephanie Hall. Email dated August 19, 2022 regarding Lancaster Turk meeting submitted by Assistant City Auditor Anitra Scott. Email dated August 19, 2022 regarding Lancaster Turk meeting submitted by Mr. Stoughton. Email dated August 19, 2022 regarding legislation to be introduced on August 22nd, submitted by Stormwater Manager Stephen Wellstead. Email dated August 19, 2022 regarding agenda submitted by Mr. Stoughton. Email dated August 19, 2022 regarding petition submitted by Service Safety Director Paul Martin. Email dated August 19, 2022 regarding petition submitted by President Ohl. And finally, an email dated August 21st, 2022 regarding finance agenda submitted by submitted by Mr. Stoughton.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to receive and file the reports of city officials.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to receive and file reports of city officials. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Are there any communications?
There are, excuse me. Email dated August 19, 2022 regarding Lancaster Turk meeting submitted by County Auditor Carrie Brown. I'm on a roll. Email dated August 21st, 2022 regarding traffic signal light at West Fair Avenue and Edie Road, Roxton Way submitted by Mary Trax. Email dated August 21st, 2022 regarding a petition submitted by Jan Kosha. I think I pronounced that right. President Roxton Ravine Condominium Association. And finally, a notice to the Legislative Authority of a new liquor license to 207 South Broad Street LLC located at 402 North Broad Street, Lancaster, Ohio, submitted by the Ohio Division of Liquor Control.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to receive and file the communications.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to receive and file communications. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. We do have a special presentation tonight. We're going to invite Bob Sulik to come to the podium. Bob is the coordinator of our Get the Lead Out campaign, which I think we all need t-shirts for, by the way, Bob, but nevertheless, he's here to talk for just a few moments about our work to abate lead within our community. So thank you for being here, and take it away.
Well, good evening, everyone. And of course, President already introduced me, so I'm not going to reintroduce myself. But I would like to say a special thanks to everyone for the recognition, and especially to Linda for my recognition for my efforts in community development. I know Linda on that day that she was giving the presentation mentioned that she just found out that I'm not into public recognition or surprises. Well, Linda, that was a double whammy. And my internal hard drive crashed. But Linda did say I was the rock in the department. And often I have said to Linda that she is a breath of fresh air for the community. Breath of fresh air, a rock, it's got to be a winning combination. Okay, let's talk about my favorite subject, lead. The last time I asked a question, it was on Jeopardy, and no one knew the answer. Not one of the contestants knew the answer. And that is, in Rome, Saturnism, by this metal, was sometimes caused by the practice of boiling down wine in vessels in it. So if they didn't like you, if someone didn't like you, they offered you this glass of wine. And of course, you had all kind of issues after that. The dangers and health hazards of lead have been known since the 4th century. The Egyptians knew about it. Now, 18 centuries later, we're still dealing with the same issue. I have met and talked with several families whose child or children have been tested positive for lead. Some of these were homeowners that just bought their home. They were in there rehabbing it, sanding, scraping, and causing lead dust, and then the child would inhale it and it was tested positive for lead. Some of the other families were tenants, where the landlord, even though he warned them that there's a possibility of lead in the home or in that unit, nothing was done. They did tell them the proper way to take precautions and to clean it, but still there was lead dust. The child picked it up, inhaled it, and was tested positive for lead. We also have a city employee. Her 3-year-old son has been tested for lead. And I know, Paul, she related that story to you, and you were touched by that story. Would you like to share that with the council?
So it was, I was pleased to find out that pediatricians today are commonly, I think maybe, I did not know they were testing children for lead, and even asked others about it. So I was pleased they had been in the house, I'm not sure how long, and they have done some steps of remediation. But it was just something how we came up with your story, and then shortly after I found out about that, as they've done precautions to maybe safeguard their child.
Yes, yes, and like I said, 18 centuries later, we've known about lead, we're still dealing with that issue. To get the word out in the community is very difficult. People just aren't responding that well. They don't think about it, but it's here. In the city of Lancaster, there's 12,698 homes built prior to 78. In 78, lead was banned from the stores and from being used. Out of that, there's 2,726 children, and 981 of those children have been tested positive for lead. In Fairfield County, there are 17,513 homes built prior to 78, 6,263 children, 1,521 have been tested positive for lead. So it's here. We need to get the word out. This is just not a community development issue. It's everyone's issue. So I did hand out literature I would ask everyone here to, in your wards, in your districts, to help spread the word about the dangers and health hazards of lead. The one flyer that you have, and I don't have a copy, so.
To get the lead out flyer, Bob?
No, not,
Oh,
well, I
that's the
think
one I
this
like
one
best.
too. Yeah, get the lead out flyer. Let me see that.
We'll
This-
attach.
We
what
are,
can here to the record.
hopefully, in September, we have about 4 or 5 billboards that will be displaying the same flyer here in the city. Here, if you have trouble sleeping at night, just please read this book. And I know probably a few weeks later, Linda introduced Eiley about the coloring books that she developed. Well, this is it. Y'all have a copy of it. I wish I could have brought crayons with me, so we could have had a coloring contest tonight, but I didn't have enough crayons. Okay. Is there any questions? How am I doing on time?
You're about out of time, Bob.
Oh, then I'll take a little longer.
Okay. About maybe a minute.
Okay.
Okay.
Any questions about?
Hey, Bob, I think a good point, we have offered training for contractors
Good
that are going
point.
into homes that are older. Could you just address that?
Sure.
Take an initiative there to provide
Sure.
training.
We have sponsored 2 classes. The first class was back in last December, and it was for lead abatement contractors. There were 7 individuals that attended. All 7 did pass the week-long, it is a week-long class, it's a 40-hour class. They all passed, but to get state license is very difficult. Only 2 were able to get their state license out of the 7. In, I think, March or April this year, we also sponsored a RRP class, which is renovation, remodeling, and painting. That is the lowest certification for lead contractors. They can do intermittent type work. They can do lead safe type work, but they can't do full lead abatement type work. So the classes of lead contractors is RRP, lead inspector, risk assessor, lead abatement worker, and lead abatement contractor. And the lead abatement contractor is at the top of the class.
So, Bob, you mentioned there were how many homes that were built before 1978 in Lancaster? 12,000 some?
12,698.
So we know who these homeowners are.
We do have, our GIS department did provide us with a map. They did map out the districts. So we do have that information available.
So is there a way to target some marketing at those particular 12,000 and some
We
homes?
have been doing that. It's just to get everyone to kind of realize it. We are putting on a larger drive, I think, hopefully, right, of marketing the program and let everyone know more about the dangers and health hazards of lead. I know DD has helped us out in their newsletter. Chamber of Commerce has put our flyer and stuff in their newsletter. I just reached out to a pediatrician's office at Connection West, Big Brothers Big Sisters, programs after school. They all have our flyers and our booklets. So hopefully the word will get out more. And then once we get the billboards up and running, it will hopefully make an impact.
Well, I still think T-shirts would be an effective way too, Bob, but that's
Oh,
okay.
yeah.
Anyone have other questions around the table for Bob?
I didn't bring one. Well, I know with Becky helped with our door hanger project. And she went around and was putting up door hangers about the lead hazard. So
Very good.
I don't know if anybody else did or not.
Yes, Mr. James.
Bob, let me ask you one quick question. What do you think the average expenditure per home will be?
Right now, we have about probably almost a dozen homes that we're working on that we haven't got started yet. It's going to range anywhere from, I'm going to say, minimum 2,000 up to, there's some homes up to 40-some thousand. Now, the grant covers up 20,000 of it. We can get approval with HUD if we go exceed the 20,000, but usually 20,000 should, within that range, should cover most of the homes that we're working in.
So at the end of the day, it's a $0 proposition for the property owner. They're going to pay
Correct.
zero.
Correct.
Okay. Very good. Other questions? Well, Bob, thank you for your work. We know this is an important initiative, and we appreciate you sharing about it tonight. Let's show Bob our appreciation for him being here this evening. Thank you very much. All right, we will move forward then with the agenda. Are there any petitions or memorials?
There is one. A petition including 72 signatures regarding improvement safety at the intersection of Edie Road and West Fair Avenue was received on Sunday, August 21st, 2022 at 5:26 p.m. from Jan Kosha. A copy of the petition was forwarded to each council member via email and is available to the public online or by contacting the clerk.
Very good, thank you.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to receive and file the petition.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to receive and file the petition. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. During this time at Lancaster City Council, we set time aside to allow any voter or taxpayer of the city to address us on any item or issue you would like. If you'd like to address Lancaster City Council tonight, we ask that you come forward. Sign in with your name and address at the podium. After you've signed in, you may begin your comments. Per the rules of council, we ask that you keep your comments to 5 minutes or less. As we continue through the meeting, during this time, City Council will not respond or answer questions or in any way interact with you. However, during a later portion of the meeting, City Council may decide to do so. With that, Mr. Koshy, I see you there, and if you'll make sure you sign in, you can go ahead and begin your comments.
I've already signed in. I am Jan Kosha. I live at 815 Lambton Circle in Roxton Ravine. Good evening, President Uhl, members of council, and administrative officials. I'm here to speak briefly about the petition submitted today to City Council concerning the traffic signal at West Fair Avenue and the Edie Road and Roxton Way. I would like to recognize some residents that we have in attendance tonight. If you would please stand up. Thank you. We appreciate you all being here. Thank you. The safety at this intersection needs to be improved because of line of sight issues, both east and west on Fair Avenue. If you're at the traffic signal going westbound, trying to turn into Roxton Way, it's difficult to see past the traffic that is coming eastbound, some of them turning left, some speedily coming through, going through eastbound. And it's also an issue for those turning left onto Edie Road from eastbound Fair Avenue. There have been numerous accidents at this intersection, 2 of them resulting in fatalities. One of those fatalities was a resident of Roxton Ravine at the time. Our most recent accident involving a resident occurred in May. She was hit by a car coming eastbound. She was turning left in. It rolled her car over and totaled it. Fortunately, she was not seriously injured, but it's a dangerous intersection, and you have to really pay attention when you're going through there, turning left. We appreciate the Service Safety Director Martin and Councilman Allers have been supportive of our request to look at improving safety at that intersection, so thank you. There is 2 ways to fix the problem at the intersection. We can put in left turn lanes from east and westbound Fair to Roxton Way and to Edie Road. That would involve, obviously, establishing a dedicated left turn lane each way, a through lane each way, signage to show what is going on, and that all costs significant amount of money, and it takes maybe up to 2 years to get that kind of thing implemented. As noted in our petition, we could change the signal pattern so it would be green for one direction at a time. That would permit people turning left into Roxton or onto Edie Road to have a clear signal that they could safely negotiate that turn. We think that could be done at minimal cost with reprogramming the signals at the intersection. That is all I have, and I thank you all for listening, and hopefully you'll support us in this traffic safety change. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kosha. Is there anyone else who would like to address Lancaster City Council this evening? Okay, well, thanks to each of you for being here tonight. Mr. Stoughton.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to make a motion that council go outside the regular order of business to address new business part 1, to discuss the current concerns just presented to council, as well as respond to inaccurate remarks from a voter last week.
Very good. Is there a second?
Second.
A motion and a second to go outside the regular order of business. We need roll call or?
Let's go ahead and do it.
Okay.
Mr. Ehlers?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Sitterly?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Motion carries 8-0. Mr. Stone, would you like to speak to this, or you want me to go ahead?
I'll defer to you,
Thank
Mr.
you.
President.
So I have had opportunity to talk with Mr. Kosha. I appreciate you talking with me beginning of the weekend, and also then had opportunity to meet with the mayor and service safety director. And we'll open this up for comment if anyone would like to make comments. I think several of us, Mr. Ehlers, Mr. James, myself, and perhaps others, regularly traverse that, including service safety director Martin, because we live out that way and have experienced in some measure what is being reported. The work of city council, the responsibility and role, is legislative in nature, and this is a distinctly administrative function in nature. So it's my recommendation that we refer this to the Administrative Safety Committee. That is an internal committee, not our safety committee, but the Administration Safety Committee that includes LDOT and the engineer and multiple other parties to consider this. And so if that is agreeable with city council, that would be my recommendation. However, I'll open it up to see if anyone does have comments or wants to say anything regarding this particular concern. Mr. Ehlers.
So I met with the members of Rocks and Ravines on the 22nd. I met with about, I'd say there was like 30 of them or so. They all feel very strongly about the fact that there should be something done there. And I drive through there every day because I live over there in Shasta. I've seen a few accidents through there, and I think that with doing a light or a lane, I think it is something that we should work towards. And I know I've talked to Paul about that, and it's something we've agreed upon. So I just feel like, I would love to see something done sooner rather than later, but I understand, obviously, things take time.
Thank you, Mr. Ehlers. Anyone else who would like to comment? Yes, Mr. McDaniel.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but a couple of months ago, I received contact from a citizen concerned about coming eastbound on Fair Avenue at that intersection. And I met with the safety director and gave him that information. The person actually included a diagram of what he hoped to see and accomplish, which was much the same as what's being discussed here. And I believe the staff safety committee meeting, you addressed this already and are working towards some resolution of some type.
Yeah, I'd be glad to address that if you'd like to. So, yes. So we have our internal staff safety meeting, which meets the last Friday of every month. It's scheduled this Friday. I've got certain tasks out. I will say, we had already decided, and I had spoken to Jan before about this, but what their proposal is something to do something sooner, and I think that's something that definitely for us to consider. The absolute probably best thing is what Jan had referred to, is to take those inside lanes, make them dedicated left turn lanes, and give them both east and westbound a protected turn, which means we would push out to the outside lanes a straight through east and west both ways. It's similar to what we have at Pierce and West Fair Avenue. But that takes a little bit of, I'm not concerned about the money as much as just that, paint is where we can't paint as much as we want right now. It takes a lot of work to get the microsurfacing off, to prep that road, to restripe it. Ultimately, that is what we absolutely need to do. In the meantime, I think their suggestion is something that I've already tasked. We have 2 LDOT employees. I have Tim Dietz here with our assistant superintendent, and Charlie Mullet, who is in charge of signs and signals. They both have came tonight, wanted to know exactly what you were proposing tonight and they're tasked to give me some options and to see if this is a possibility where we can make a signal change. I can't say absolutely tonight. I will work hard. We will make that internal staff meeting, police, fire, engineering, LDOT, myself, and the mayor. And we talk about a lot of safety issues. We talk about pedestrian safety. We talk about specific, and you know what we do in there. It's quite a very good meeting. So we will specifically, I've already tasked it to be addressed at that safety council meeting, and maybe we'll come out there with a decision. And I wanted them to hear exactly what you're requesting. I think we fully understand what you're asking, and that was what I wanted to hear tonight. So it is a viable option. In the meantime, I'm one, as you know, I'm willing to try something, but I would like to have our staff come together and say it's a doable thing. Does it take light structure changes? Is there a cost to it? If there is no cost to it, maybe we could. So that's what I desire to do right now.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Martin. Further comments then, given the information we now have regarding how this is going to be considered going forward? Yes, let's see if there's anyone else, Mr. Ehlers, and we'll come back to you. Anyone else want to comment on this? Mr. Ehlers.
If we can do the lights for little to no cost, would that be something we'd rather do as a permanent fix, just for the long run? Because I think doing both, either the lights or the turn lane, I think it achieves that same purpose, you know? So I think just to save like time and money of our LDOT workers who are already so busy, I think if the lights are something that can be done, I think maybe that might be the better option, but either option are great options.
So here's my concern with what was proposed tonight. I think it would give us protected turns, but we also have to look at the flow of traffic. And I want us to put in permanent, what is the best way to move as much traffic as possible? So that's why I don't have enough data to say that. That's why I'm still saying, I think possibly what we really permanently want to do is probably best, and it would flow more traffic. But that's something that we're gonna do an analysis of, and, but that's a good question. I'm grateful, and I'm already thinking about what the answer is, and we'll get that task and we'll try to figure that out. What we have proposed, and just to let you know, the mayor desires to have a real significant roundabout, and he has said that how often a roundabout, that would be the #1 spot here in the city. And some of you are smiling out there, I see that. But I'm a proponent for it, but I will have to tell you what we want to do for that intersection. Low cost if we just to change the signal sequence, but what we want to do is still much cheaper than a roundabout. You don't think a roundabout costs money? We estimate $1 million. I've asked somebody to consider donating $1 million to see if we can make that happen. I haven't heard from that person yet, but anyway, I just let you know, we've been thinking about this. We definitely think that it's worth trying to improve that intersection to be safe, because a lot of traffic flows through there. And so they'll show up Friday to give me a absolute, as you referred to, accident count, what kind of accidents we have there, what directions they are. It's really good data that we bring in that meeting we discuss.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Are there any other comments or questions on this issue? Okay, if not, I'll just say briefly, Mr. Kashi, thank you for bringing this forward into the residents of Roxton Ravine. We are glad that you're here tonight. I think, again, this is something that many of us have also experienced and are taken seriously, and so hopefully we'll get some additional response and perhaps an answer, but at least continued consideration of this in the coming days and weeks as it gets referred off to this particular committee. So thank you all for being here. The second item that Mr. Stoughton mentioned was that the mayor would like to make a statement regarding some of the comments that were made during voter and taxpayer time at our last meeting. So, Mr. Mayor, we'll turn it over to you.
Yes, thank you. At the last city council meeting, a gentleman came up and made some comments that had us all scratching our heads because we had no idea what he was talking about. So I have a summary of our investigation, and I'm going to read it just so I don't miss anything. After the August 8th council meeting, I made a follow-up call to Mr. Nolan to get the details of the incident he addressed during the public comment portion of the meeting. He was able to identify the date and time of the incident. Law Director Hall retrieved the July 24th call logs and reviewed the body cam videos of the two interactions at the Allen Street scene. The facts are: a call came in to the police department non-emergency line complaining of a car parked on Allen Street with a person asleep inside. An officer responded, ran the plates, and engaged the car's occupant outside of the vehicle. The occupant stated that he had been at a bar and then a residence. He later left a residence, realized that he was impaired, and decided to park to sleep it off to avoid getting arrested for an OVI. The officer determined that the occupant was not impaired at the time, this was 6+ hours later, but informed him that he could not drive the vehicle away as his license was under suspension. The occupant indicated there was someone coming to get him. Later, a second call was received on the non-emergency line complaining that the vehicle was still parked on the street. The same officer responded to the second call. The vehicle was still present when the officer arrived at the scene, but the occupant was gone. The officer then visited with the calling resident for in excess of 30 minutes. During the visit, he did state that the occupant of the car had 4 to 5 suspensions of his operator's license, which may have been misinterpreted by the resident as warrants. To summarize, there were no violations that could result in a citation, arrest, or vehicle impoundment. The vehicle was properly registered and legally parked on a public street. The vehicle was removed prior to the expiration of the 48-hour limit. The occupant had a suspended operator's license but was not observed driving the vehicle, and there was no determination that the occupant had outstanding warrants. So the information that the commenter at the last meeting received was not accurate.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Does anyone have any questions or comments on this particular item? Well, thank you very much for helping to clear that up. I think I was among some last meeting that had no idea what was going on, and it sounded very weird, and so we appreciate the follow-up by you and Law Director Hall to try to figure out exactly what happened here. Ms. Tina.
I will say, I've had times where people have called me and they've said this has happened, so I will go to the police department and get the report to see what happened. And that way it tells you exactly, you've got your story, so that kind of clears up some things, because sometimes a resident will say something and then it's really something else happened. However, you know, if there's a case that I always tell people, go get your police report and read it to make sure what's in there is what you said or did or whatever, you know, to make sure that's right. But, I mean, you really need to go pull police reports.
Thank you very much. All right, other thoughts or comments? Okay, with that, Mr. Stoughton.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to make a motion that council return to the regular order of business.
Second.
A motion and a second to return the regular order of business. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ehlers?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Sitterly? Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Motion to return to the regular order passes 8-0. We are now back to the agenda as it stands. Are there reports of standing committees?
There are Public Works Committee meeting minutes dated July 16, 2022, submitted by Mr. Schoonover. Sorry. Law Committee meeting minutes dated August 3rd, 2022, submitted by Mrs. Kreitz. Water Pollution Control meeting minutes dated August 10th, 2022, submitted by Mr. James. And finally, the Finance Committee meeting minutes dated August 22nd, 2022, submitted by Mr. Stoughton.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to receive and file the reports of standing committees.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to receive and file reports of standing committees. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Are there reports of special committees?
There are none to be presented.
We have no public hearings this evening. We'll move to the reading of resolutions, beginning with the third reading of temporary resolution 94-22.
A resolution to amend the certificate of appropriation with the county auditor and appropriate from the unencumbered balance in the general fund 1001, offered by Mr. Stoughton and seconded by Mr. McDaniel.
Mr. Stoughton.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to make a motion that council pass and gross and enter upon the written record Resolution Temporary 9422, please.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass and gross and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 94-22. Discussion, Mr. Stoughton.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. As required by Ohio Revised Code, we are, as a city, are required to pay for indigent burials. We have actually spent most of our budget for 2022, so we are appropriating another $9,500 to hopefully get us through the end of the year. Any money not spent will fall into the carryover at the end of the year.
Thank you very much. Further discussion on the motion to pass. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Sitterly?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Temporary Resolution 94-22 passes 8-0. We now have first reading on a series of resolutions, beginning with Temporary Resolution 102-22.
A resolution to increase receipts, appropriate from the unencumbered balance in the Fuel Depot Fund 7010, and appropriate from the unencumbered balance in various funds and amend the certificate with the county auditor. Offered by Mr. Stoughton, seconded by Mr. McDaniel.
Mr. Stoughton?
Thank you, Mr. President. We talked about this in finance. This is a piece of legislation to increase budgets for fuel. Obviously, we've all seen what's happened to fuel and the cost that we pay for the fuel at the fuel depot for fuel. So this is the first of two readings on this piece.
First of two readings on Temporary Resolution 102-22. Temporary Resolution 103-22.
A resolution authorizing the mayor to prepare and submit an application to participate in the Ohio Public Works Commission, OPWC State Capital Improvement Program, SCIP, and to execute contracts as required. Offered by Mr. James and seconded by Mr. Matlin.
Mr. James?
Thank you, President Knoll. At this time, this is the first of three readings.
First of three readings on Temporary Resolution 103-22. Temporary Resolution 104-22.
A resolution to appropriate funds in the Water Reserve Fund and authorize the payment of bills for the Ohio Water Development Authority loan for the North Water Treatment Plant and to authorize the issuance of any then and now certificates as a result of this project. Offered by Mr. James and seconded by Mrs. Teener.
Mr. James?
Thank you, President Knoll. At this time, I'd like to make the motion that council suspend its rules and waive the second and third reading of Temporary Resolution 104-22.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the second and third reading of Temporary Resolution 104-22. Discussion, Mr. James?
Briefly, as we discussed in the Finance Committee meeting, this gives us the opportunity to go ahead for some of the expected expenses for the North Water Treatment Plant that's coming up still yet this year.
Okay. Further discussion on the motion to suspend. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Sitterly?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Motion to suspend carries 8-0. Mr. James?
Thank you, President Knoll. At this time, I'd like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record Temporary Resolution 104-22.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record Temporary Resolution 104-22. Discussion, Mr. James?
Nothing further, thank you.
Discussion on the motion to pass. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Sitterly?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Temporary Resolution 104-22 passes 8-0. Temporary Resolution 105-22.
A resolution to increase and decrease appropriations in the General Fund 1001 for contract services in the Law Director and City Prosecutor's Office and to declare an emergency. Offered by Mr. Stoughton and seconded by Mrs. Kreitz.
Mr. Stoughton?
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the second and third reading of Resolution Temporary 105-22, please.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the second and third reading of Temporary Resolution 105-22. Discussion, Mr. Stoughton?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. We are asking for suspension because we have good news. Law Director Hall actually has found a potential assistant prosecutor who is currently waiting the results of the Ohio bar exam. So to hire that particular person, we can hire that person in contract services. And to do that, we need to decrease salary line items and increase contract services so we can bring that person in until we determine they've passed the bar and then put them on the payroll. So we're asking for suspension so she can move quickly.
Very good. Further discussion on the motion to suspend. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Sitterly?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Motion to suspend carries 8-0. Mr. Stoughton?
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record Resolution Temporary 105-22, please.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record Temporary Resolution 105-22. Discussion, Mr. Stoughton?
Nothing further.
Discussion on the motion to pass. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Sitterly?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Temporary Resolution 105-22 passes 8-0. Temporary Resolution 106-22.
A resolution accepting the amounts and rates as determined by the Fairfield County Budget Commission and authorizing the necessary tax levies and certifying them to the county, offered by Mr. Stoughton and seconded by Mr. McDaniel.
Mr. Stoughton.
Thank you, Mr. President. As the subject indicates, this is a required annual piece to the county auditor, and this will be the first of three readings.
First of three readings on Temporary Resolution 106-22. Temporary Resolution 107-22.
A resolution to appropriate from the unencumbered balance and amend the certificate of appropriations with the county auditor in the general fund 1001. Increase receipts, appropriate from the unencumbered balance, and amend the certificate of other sources and appropriations with the county auditor in the Lancaster Community Development Fund 2026. Offered by Mr. McDaniel and seconded by Mr. Schoonover.
Mr. McDaniel.
Yes, this will be the first reading of 2 or 3, depending on outcome or discussion at the Economic Development Committee meeting on September 1st.
Thank you very much. Then first reading on Temporary Resolution 107-22. Temporary Resolution 108-22.
A resolution to accept the written recommendations of the Tax Incentive Review Council for the continuance of the 2006 Tax Increment Finance Agreement for Island Capital Investment Group, LLC, Menards, Inc., RLG Lancaster LTD, GCG Lancaster LTD, Anchor Lancaster LLC, and Walmart Stores East LP pursuant to Ohio Revised Code ORC 5709.85C1 and E. Offered by Mr. Stoughton and seconded by Mr. McDaniel.
Mr. Stoughton.
Well, good thing for the clerk, she gets to read that 2 more times on top of the other pieces we have in November, so lucky you. This will be the first of 3 readings.
First of 3 readings on Temporary Resolution 108-22. Are there any further resolutions to come before Lancaster City Council this evening? If not, we'll move to the reading of ordinances, beginning with the second reading of Temporary Ordinance 24-22.
An ordinance to amend permanent ordinance 12-22, repeal and replace existing permanent ordinance 12-22 for the non-union pay ordinance and to declare an emergency. Offered by Mr. Stoughton and seconded by Mrs. Kreitz.
Mr. Stoughton.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the third reading of ordinance temporary 24-22, please.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the third reading of Temporary Ordinance 24-22. Discussion, Mr. Stoughton.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. This piece is changing a couple of roles in the law director's office. She is dropping from 4 paralegals to 3 and replacing that paralegal position with a lower graded clerical assistant role.
Thank you very much. Further discussion on the motion to suspend. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Sitterly?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Motion to suspend carries 8-0. Mr. Stoughton.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record ordinance temporary 24-22, please.
Second.
Motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record Temporary Ordinance 24-22. Discussion, Mr. Stoughton.
Nothing further?
Discussion on the motion to pass. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Sitterly?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Temporary Ordinance 24-22 passes 8-0. Are there other ordinances to come before Lancaster City Council this evening? If not, we have no tabled legislation. Is there any unfinished business tonight that anyone would like to talk about? We dealt with 2 items in new business. Is there any other new business that anyone would like to discuss? Mr. Stoughton.
I forgot to mention in finance, I will not be at the next council meeting or finance committee meeting.
Okay.
Therefore, Mrs. Kreitz has volunteered to lead the next finance committee meeting.
Much like the Turk, I imagine. Yeah, she was voluntold like you were, right? Yes.
She will do very well.
Yes, she will. All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Stoughton. Further new business tonight? If not, we'll ask that the clerk please read our regular scheduled upcoming meetings.
The next meeting of City Council is September 12th. The meeting following is September 26th. Both meetings here in council chambers at 6:30 p.m. Upcoming committee meetings for the next 30 days. Economic Development, September 1st at 7:30 a.m. in the 1897 conference room. Water Pollution, September 7th, which has moved from September 14th I should have said this first. Okay, so the water pollution control is now September 7th at 8:30 a.m. in the 1897 conference room. It's moved a week sooner. Safety, September 12th at 7:30 a.m. at the 1897 conference room. Finance, September 12th here at 6 p.m. in council chambers. And finally, the IT telecom meeting, September 16th at 8 a.m. at the 1897 conference room.
Thank you very much. Are there any bills this evening?
There is one bill payable to PNC for publication of legislation in the MNCO paper for $124.10.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to pay the bill.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to pay the bill. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Is there a need for an executive session this evening? If not, a motion to adjourn is in order.
Mr. President, I'd like to make that a motion to adjourn.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to adjourn the meeting. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you all very much. Please remember to sign your legislation. Have a great week.
Excuse me.
You walked down the aisle and promised happily ever after. Sometimes happily ever after means ending a relationship. We know the conversations are not easy. Deciding what's best for you, your children, and your next steps takes work and communication. At Dagger Law, we know there are no monsters in a divorce, only people trying to find their way. Local, trusted, experienced. Dagger Law.
The Frankie Smith Funeral Home and Crematory in Lancaster and the Johnson Smith Funeral Home in Baltimore have a long and wonderful history of serving our community. Feel free to give us a call at 740-653-0652. Stop in and see us at either of our two locations, 405 North Columbus Street in Lancaster and 207 South Main Street in Baltimore. Respect for tradition, regard for change.